What's up, booktube? It's Leah Kerber, and today I'm here to bring you a monthly book recommendations. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet because the light on my camera is already blinking. So monthly book recommendations is a Goodreads group I run. I will leave a link to it down below, and hashtag monthly book recs. It's just a community where I post a monthly topic to help inspire you to make some sort of book recommendations video or blog post or list or whatever. So for the month of September, we're doing a catch-up month where basically you're encouraged, if you've missed a previous month, to go back and do that topic this month. So that's what I'm doing, obviously, but I'm going to be doing the Subversive reads recommendations, which was the August topic. I'm still not satisfied with the list I'm presenting with you. I'm going to be presenting here, but I have been mulling over this topic for like almost 2 months now because I had a couple of really initial great ideas that I wanted to put on this Rex list, but I wanted the scope to be bigger, and so I've been wrestling with how I wanted to do all the recommendations that are going to be in here, and I didn't hit the bar that I set for myself, but it's almost the end of September and I really want to put this rec list out there for you. So in monthly book recs, I always try to encourage people to think outside the box and to take the prompt in whatever direction they find inspiring, and that's kind of what that's definitely what I've done here. So for subversive reads, I didn't just want to pick one type of subversion and give you like 5 recs about a specific type of subversion. I wanted to take lots of different ways that books can be subversive and offer a recommendation for each of these different subversion methods or the way subversion can look. So most of these have to do with the books themselves, like how they're written, and one of these is more general, and that is political. So first up, I did want to offer 2 subversive political reads that tie into another past monthly book recommends topic, which was resistance reads. I didn't make a video for that because I honestly don't read nonfiction very often, and I honestly just didn't have enough resistance recommendations to do a whole video about that. But I do think that there is a lot of crossover between resistance and subversion, especially in like political texts or texts with political subject matters or themes. So I want to start off this list by recommending Citizen by Claudia Rankine. This is technically nonfiction because it is poetry. It is a poetry collection, and it's a mix of different forms of poetry. There is some that verges more on essay-ish poetry, but for the most part it's poetry. I read it several years ago when it first came out, and Claudia Rankine is a Black author, and she is writing about a myriad of different Black experiences in America and what it means to be a Black American, and it was relevant in 2016 when I read it, and it is just as relevant today. I think it's very powerful and very moving. I wish I had it in front of me so that I could like read some quotes off of it, but I don't. I know I talked about it in one of my very early wrap-ups on this channel, and I know I read a few quotes from it in that video, so if I can find that video, I will link it in the cards and you can check it out. Along that same lines, I'm going to recommend another book that I haven't actually read yet, but I think is in a similar vein as that book, and it appeared in my book haul my last book haul video. That is The Activist by Renee Gladman. This is an older book. This was published, I think, in 2003. Again, it is academic African-American poetry. It's something between poetry and narrative, just like flipping through it. And I know it also wrestles with the Black experience in America, and also what it means to be an activist and to be resistance, like a member of the resistance. And I think this is more fiction, but when you look at how it's talked about online, it's talked about like it's a textbook. So I haven't read this yet, but just kind of glancing through this looks to remind me a lot of Citizen. So I want to just kind of float this out there because I haven't necessarily seen people talking about this, and I think it could be a really interesting text along the same lines. So those are kind of like my two serious recs under like subversive fiction. So subversive political racial fiction. Again, unfortunately that's honestly an area of my reading that's lacking. I don't read enough nonfiction. So I was really glad to see people make recommendations lists so that I could get recommendations. Like, I'm not gonna lie, a little bit of part of me like made that topic. I think I made it back in June just because I wanted some recommendations. But that's what this Goodreads group is really all about, is to offer recommendations and to get recommendations from the community on some topics. So, okay, so moving on. Second category of subversion I wanted to talk about was subversive tropes. I'm gonna have to, let me grab the book if I can find it. Like, I know it's in this cubby, but like when I organized these books and I put all of my read books to the back, I really didn't think about how difficult that would make getting to my read books. For subversive tropes, the book I want to recommend, and this is a cheat because this author is going to appear twice on this list, but the book I really want to recommend is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So this is a perennial booktube darling, but it's genuinely one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I haven't reread it in a number of years. It's also a book like I really want to reread, but I still feel very, very strongly about how much I love this. So this is here, like, because it's a subversion of tropes, because this book is a fantasy novel that is inspired by like Eastern European folklore. The lights just flickered because it's raining heavily outside. So this is inspired by Eastern European fairy tale fiction. Sorry for the blinking lights. But it's not really a fairy tale retelling. It really does feel like a original story. So it is about a small village that lives in the shadow of a wizard's tower, and well, actually, and the tower hosts a wizard who is known as the Dragon. So we've got these tropes of tiny village surrounded by a forest, questionably evil wizard in a tower, and every, I can't remember if it's like every 4 years or something, the villagers have to offer up their daughters, and one of them is chosen by the wizard, taken into the tower, and not seen for the next 4 years. And then she's released, and she's always released, and she's weird. She can't stay. She's changed too much. She doesn't fit into the village, and she always leaves. And there's a girl in the protagonist's cohort who like growing up, everyone knows she's going to be the one who's picked by the dragon, because she's like beautiful and like meek and hardworking and just the typical dragon choice. And but then when the day comes for the choosing, our protagonist Agnieszka gets chosen instead of the girl, and she gets whisked away into the tower. And so you're subverting these tropes of like, this other girl is supposed to be the chosen one, but then our protagonist ends up being the chosen one. And also like what the dragon is, what he's doing, his relationship with the girls that he takes. I mean, relationship sounds so sordid when I say it, because it's like, that's the thing. It's a subversion of that kind of trope. Like, why he's taking them, is a subversion of what you expect, and like like how he interacts with them is completely atypical from what you would expect from these kinds of tropes. And this book was so much fun. It had I love the relationships in this book. There are romantic relationships, there are friendships. I love the kind of mystery of what's going on. I love the forest. I love the wizard. I love the different types of magic and how magic is approached in this book. I think there's a subversion of what I term the kind of Sanderson effect in fantasy fiction, which I don't like. Everyone and their uncle has seen the famous Brandon Sanderson lectures on like the proper way to write fantasy fiction and to write magic systems. And laying it down as though it is the rule of law and this is the only acceptable way to write convincing magic systems. And this is 100% a subversion of that. And I appreciate it so much for that, because I don't like that method of storytelling. Beyond just like my dislike of Sanderson, I also just don't really like books written that way. And so I just really appreciated all the different things that are going on in Uprooted. So, okay. Number 3, subversion of a retelling. And this is where the cheat comes in, because I'm going to recommend another Naomi Novik novel. Yeah, I know. I love Naomi Novik, okay? So sue me. I've been reading her stuff since she was writing like Stargate Atlantis fan fiction, okay? The thing I want to recommend for a fairy tale retelling subversive book is going to be Spinning Silver. So this, on the surface, is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but the focus and the narrative choices in this book are so much beyond a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and they're so interesting. Like, I'm not particularly into Rumpelstiltskin at all. It's not a fairy tale that really interests me, and so I really only read this book because it's Naomi Novik, and I figured I'd have a good time, and I did. But I had a fun time in ways that I wasn't expecting. So this is a book that takes place in kind of a fantastical version of northeastern Europe. It is about a Jewish girl whose father is the local moneylender. He is too kind-hearted. He can never call in debts, and the townspeople are both anti-Semitic, and they take advantage of his kindness. And so they are poor and destitute, and her mother is dying one winter, and so the daughter Miriam takes it upon herself to call in all the debts. And so she takes over her father's money lending, and she becomes the money lender of the village, and she's very good at it. And she's very strict and uncompromising about it. And she starts making money, and it catches the attention of a kind of like an unseelie type fairy folk who live in the forest, who everyone is deathly afraid of. And they kind of force her to start, well, the king of these people, the Sterrick, I think is what they're called. He challenging her to turn his Sterrick silver into gold, and ends up whisking her away to his kingdom. But like, there's so much more going on. There is another local village girl who is first kind of brought into indentured servitude to pay off her father's debts, but then ends up being granted this opportunity for freedom and like personal agency through working with Miriam. That is just fantastic. There's another storyline with a local duke's daughter who marries the Tsar, and how she plays politics and stands up to literal demons while doing so, and how all three of these women's stories intertwine with one another. It is not at all, I think, what you would expect from, like, on the tin, a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. So there you go. Category number 4 is genre subversion. So for this category, I'm going to mention a popular book. You may have heard of it. It's Gideon the Ninth. I don't know who hasn't read this book, but I'm gonna recommend it here in case you haven't felt inspired to pick this up, because this is such a weird little book, and I loved it. It works for me on so many levels, and one of the levels in which it really, really works for me is the ways in which it is so subversive of like its genre and its characters. But so we're going to talk about genre because like this is a fantasy science fiction novel, a lot like, actually, well, I don't want to compare it to Dune, but Dune is also a fantasy science fiction novel, and this is, so is Gideon, but I don't want to draw a parallel between these two books, because those two books are nothing alike. However, this is a book that at its core is about necromancy, which is something from fantasy fiction. And even the necromancy in this book, the way it's talked about and the way it's shown and not explained at all, it does feel like magic of a kind. However, it's set in a universe that is science fiction. It's purely science fiction. It is far future, space empire, multi-planets, there are spaceships, there is space travel, there is a space fleet and a space emperor, and I mean, this is like very science fiction. They have all these conveniences of science fiction, but at the heart, they're all raising the dead and doing bone and necromancy magic stuff and having duels with swords. And it's very much like this weird swashbuckling fantasy set on a futuristic space empire planet. And it's so much fun. I freaking love the characters. I think it's hilarious. I think Gideon is such an irreverent, sarcastic, weird twerp. I love her antagonistic relationship with Harrow. I love the spooky atmosphere and like the kind of isolated, closed circle murder mystery elements of the story. Like, there's just so much going on in this book, and it's so much fun. I really love it. I really love it. And I think if you like weird, genre-bending stories, you could love it too. Especially if you like very sarcastic, irreverent protagonists who seem to operate under the fake it until you make it methodology. Okay, and then finally, my last subversive category is going to be subversive characters. And I honestly put this category in here because I wanted 5 categories. And so it also took me a really long time to think of something for this, because I've just been drawing blanks. Yeah, the past like 2 months. So I'm going to talk about a character who is not necessarily in herself, I would say, very subversive, but what she does in her story is subversive. She is a subversive element in her own narrative. And that is going to be Vienne from Chocolat. So I love this book a lot. I do love the movie. The book and the movie are different things. But fundamentally, they are about this woman named Vienne. She is living in France. She's unmarried. She has a daughter. And she comes to this tiny, sleepy little conservative village right before Lent and opens a chocolaterie. And in the book, this is all taking place kind of in the 90s. So it's not quite... It's a different type of subversion than what happens in the film, which is taking place in like the 50s at post-World War II. But anyways, still, both extremely subversive. So she is, and especially in the book, there's a lot more emphasis on, she's not just shaking up kind of the traditions of the people, she's not just like shaking up people's kind of the monotony of their day-to-day lives. She's actively kind of swept into this battle with the local priest, and her uncanny ability to perceive her customers' private discontents and alleviate them with just the right confection coaches the villagers to abandon themselves to temptation and happiness, but enrages Pierre Renaud, the local priest. She stirs up people, and she challenges people to live their lives beyond just abstinence and kind of a vague moral religious fear of, you know, living. And she combats racism, and she doesn't go out looking to fight the local priest. Really, she just challenges people to live their lives, and this makes the local priest so angry he starts this battle with her. But in doing so, she subverts just the unhappiness gripping this village and helps so many people find themselves. And the book is absolutely magical and lovely. So those are my recommendations. Thanks so much for tuning in. I have a lot of reviews I am supposed to be filming, but I don't feel like filming them, so who knows when you'll get reviews. I hope you found some of these recommendations helpful or interesting. Let me know if I've inspired you to pick any of them up. Hopefully I have. That's always kind of the goal of these monthly recommendations video. If you're interested in participating in monthly recommendations, be sure to check out the Goodreads group down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.